وينشر الهدي إيمانا وموعظة فبالجهالة قد خابت مساعينا غابت مناقبنا واسود حاضرنا غابت مناقبنا واسود حاضرنا وأوشك اليأس أن يغشى أمانينا.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaban bikum. Welcome to another edition of the Sulaimaan Ravat show. The pleasure is all mine. I say this every week, but I mean it every single week. It's always an honor. It's a pleasure. It's a privilege to be able to interact with the viewers of ITV. And we commence by making dua to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. And we start off by supplicating Almighty Allah and saying, Oh Allah, let this program be a beneficial one, both for the speaker as well as the viewers out there. You know, a thought crossed my mind just as we are about to commence with the program, and I want to share that thought with you right at the onset. And that is that you sometimes get so caught up with the different challenges and difficulties and hardships and hurdles of life that we fail to realize what is going for us. And we fail to realize what the positives are in our lives. And we fail to realize how many blessings we have. In other words, we get so caught up with the difficulties that we have lying ahead in the day, problems we may have in different relationships, stumbling blocks that may be appearing unexpectedly. Whilst we're dealing with all of that, we lose sight of the fact that there's so much to be grateful for. There's so much to be grateful for. On the one hand, people are talking about elections and how many feel there isn't that one party that you can have confidence in. On the other hand, people are talking about recession. They're talking about the effects of the recession, the Great Recession. Pravin Gordon made numerous references to it during his budget speech, that, you know what, things would have been much better off financially for the country had it not been for the Great Recession in that 2008-2009 period. People are talking about the petrol price. People are talking about the weakening of the rand. People are talking about the rising prices of commodities, difficulties with education, difficulties with healthcare, difficulties with, different things. And it can bog you down. It can get you despondent. It can get you depressed. It can make you feel overwhelmed. It can make you feel like, it's getting a bit too much. But there's a hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. I'm not going to go through the hadith at this point, nor am I going to elaborate on it too much, but I'm just going to make a reference to the key message in this hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And in this prophetic saying, this prophetic statement, the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam says, when you wake up in the morning and you have clothes to cover your back, and you have enough food in your belly to keep you alive, and you have some shelter over your roof, over your head, then you have enough. Then you've been granted sufficient. Then you should consider yourself to be amongst the fortunate. Now, as I said, I'm not going to go into the literal translation of the hadith at this point, nor am I going to elaborate too much. It's just the crux of it that I've narrated to you that I want to emphasize. When you wake up in the morning, then be grateful that you're waking up with a roof over your head. Be grateful that there's milk in the fridge and there's water in the tap and that there's a cup of coffee or a cup of tea that you are able to drink. Be grateful that you have a car or that you have a mode of transport. Think of the people in Syria who don't know where the next meal is going to come from, who are shivering in icy cold conditions and they don't have sufficient protection. Think about those in our own country when we hear reports from NGOs and from aid organizations, how they find people here in South Africa in the midst of winter sleeping on bare concrete. Can you imagine the condition of that person? You know, you and I, we drive on the highways, we come across robots, we see people who are begging. We see people who sleep under bridges. We see people who sleep on the streets, who are literally out there, who have nothing, no roof over their head. They don't know where the next meal is coming from. You're having problems with the boss, at least appreciate the fact that you have a job. You're having problem with the employees, appreciate the fact that Allah has given you a business. Allah has given you something which you own. You're having problems with the car, appreciate the fact that at least you don't have to walk. You're having problems with your children, appreciate the fact that you have children. Many people don't have children and they wish they could have children with all the problems that those children will bring. So sometimes we get too bogged down by the negative, and sometimes we get too bogged down by what's going wrong, and we don't focus on what's going right. Like you see, this is a white garment, and on a white garment, the whole garment is white. But if there's a black spot, then that black spot is what stands out, and everyone then starts to focus on that black spot. Now, there's two ways you can interpret it. One way of interpreting it is maybe that black spot is the one thing that's wrong, and the white is everything that's right. Or that black spot is the one thing that's negative, and the white is everything that's positive. So people will focus on that black spot. But that black spot on the entire white garment is but a spot. It's just a dot. It's a mark. It's a bit of dirt. Appreciate the fact that you've got this garment and that it's white and that it's shining and that it's clean. But what happens? Human nature is such, you start obsessing with that black spot, and then you try and smudge it off, or you try and scrape it off. And in your attempt to scrape it off, you smudge it, and the spot becomes a bit bigger. And now you get agitated, and now the whole garment is irritating you. And you can't wait to get home and to remove that garment and to wear another garment, because you feel now shy to appear in front of people with that garment. You feel dirty, you feel unclean, you feel unsightly. You feel that, I'm not looking presentable. All of these things start playing on your mind now, and your day becomes a miserable day. I'm using a very simplistic example, but the point I'm making is that we allow our problems to snowball. We allow our problems to have this accumulative effect. We don't appreciate the fact that, hey, I've got so much to be grateful for. If I'm waking up this morning with a headache, instead of thinking, oh no, man, headache again. Why is it that I'm always plagued with headaches? Think about the person who's terminally ill with cancer. How they would want to swap with you. They'll say, you know what, take my cancer, I'll take your headache anytime. I'll have a headache 10 times a day. I'll have a severe headache, no problem. But this cancer is something that's bringing my life to an end, that has totally crippled me. So there's always someone who's got far less than what you got, who's got much more difficulty and hardship. And that's why Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has encouraged us, when it comes to worldly affairs, don't look at those who have more, look at those who have less. That helps to keep you in check. And it assists you in keeping things in perspective. So as we sit this evening, look back at what you have, or look around you and say, you know what, at least I have the function of my limbs. At least I'm breathing properly. At least there's food on the table. At least I know where the next meal is coming from. At least I have a roof over my head. At least I know that I'm not terminally ill. At least I know that tomorrow I've got a job and I got somewhere to go to. These are the many things that we take for granted, but in reality, these are the things that we ought to be celebrating, and these are the things that we ought to be appreciating, and these are the things from which we ought to be taking so much of joy. You had a lengthy day at the office, you had a hectic week. Now you come home and the children are irritating you because they're troubling each other and they're laughing and they're giggling and they're making noise, and all you want is a bit of peace and quiet. But then in your old age, when all you have is peace and quiet, and those children have grown up and they're gone and they're living their own lives, then you wish and you pray for that noise. And you say, oh, the house is so dead, and there's no life in this house anymore. It's just me and my spouse, it's just me and my husband, or it's just me and my wife, and we have nobody here in the house, and things are gone so quiet. That's in old age. Sometimes the children go away for a few days, then you start appreciating. So yes, I can understand. We also go through those patches. You come home, you're very tired, you just want some shut-eye, you want some moments to gather your thoughts, and here the children are hammering the daylights out of each other, screaming at each other, fighting for the ball and fighting for the pen and over silly, petty things, bringing the roof down. But appreciate the fact that you have children. What a great bounty. What a great blessing of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. So again I'm saying, just take out a moment, reflect, think, contemplate, introspect, ponder. There are so many positives for which I need to be grateful. Am I perhaps not spending a little too much time on that which is negative? And is that perhaps making me a little too negative? And is that not leading me towards being ungrateful to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala for His many bounties and His many favors His many boons and His many blessings upon me. Coming up this evening, as usual, we'll commence with our dua slot. We will look at a dua, a supplication, a prayer taught to us by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We'll recap the supplication and the dua that we discussed last week, a summary of that, and then we'll continue with this week's one. Then we move on to our hadith discussion, that is where we discuss prophetic sayings, that statements and actions of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We'll continue with the tafsir of Ayatul Kursi, the greatest verse of the Quran. We were discussing one sentence per week. We'll recap on the sentence that we discussed last week, and then we'll continue with the next sentence for this week, inshallah. And then in the marriage segment, last week we spoke about giving your husband some space and having or giving each other space time or me time, as some people refer to it. Today we talk about how do you conduct yourself when you're suspicious of a woman that your husband works with. How do you approach the situation where you say, hey, that one, marriage breaker, marriage breaker. You have that suspicion, but now your husband works with that woman, rightly or wrongly, whatever the circumstances may be. How do you as a wife deal with that situation? That's what we will be discussing in the marriage segment towards the end of the program, inshallah. Throughout the program, the Twitter handle as well as the Facebook address and the email address will appear on your screen. We appreciate your interaction. Welcome back. We now commence with our first discussion, and that is based on the prayers, the supplications, the du'as taught to us by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There is one point that I need to emphasize and one point I need to mention with regards to this feature. This feature is not necessarily there so that you are expected to memorize all of these supplications and all of these prayers. Obviously, if you do memorize them, it becomes easier to beseech Allah and to pray Allah with these words taught to us by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Whilst we often mention that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam rather Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala, Almighty Allah, understands any language in any way, even if it's in your broken English or broken Arabic or whatever language you prefer, whatever is your mother tongue, even if your grammar is not up to standard and even if you are not most eloquent, Allah even understands the whispering of the heart. Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala understands the thought that crosses your mind. So in that sense, it's not compulsory for you to pray only using these words. But these are the words that are taught to us by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and naturally they are more effect in the words that are taught to us by the Messenger of Allah, by the Prophet of Allah. But more important than that is these du'as teach us about what our priorities are in life, what ought to be of concern to us, what ought to be of importance to us, what should we be focused on, what should we be trying to achieve. These kind of things are what we learn and what we glean from these prophetic prayers and these prophetic supplications. Now, the one we discussed last week was a supplication narrated by Abdullah bin Umar radiyallahu anhuma and recorded in Tirmidhi. It's lengthy. I'll just go through the translation. We're not going to go through the entire explanation again because we discussed it at length in our last program. Allahumma qsim lana min khashyatika ma tahulu bihi baynana wa bayna ma'asik. That, O Allah, grant us that fear of you which you may drive between us and our disobedience to you. Meaning, grant us that much of your consciousness that it becomes a barrier between us and your disobedience. وَمِن طَاعَتِكَ مَا تُبَلِّغُنَا بِهِ جَنَّتَكَ. And grant us that much of your obedience that will lead us to paradise. Grant us that much ability to obey you that it will be sufficient for us to secure entry into Jannah, into paradise. وَمِنَ الْيَقِينِ مَا تُهَوِّنُ بِهِ عَلَيْنَا مَصَائِبَ الدُّنْيَا. Grant us that much of yaqeen, that much of conviction that it will lighten for us the hardships of this material world. Because there's no human in the history of humanity that has come, and whatever is remaining of humanity up to the day of Qiyamah, that will come to this world and not face any difficulty or any hardship. Because the prophets, alayhimus salatu wassalam, faced difficulty and hardship. They were the ones who faced the most difficulty and hardship. The most beloved and the closest servants, the choicest servants of Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala, they face difficulty and hardship. So every human has to face difficulty and hardship. But we're saying, oh Allah, grant us that much of conviction in your assistance, in your ability, in your power, that it makes it easy for us to face up to and to rise up to these challenges that the world and this worldly existence will throw at us. وَمَتِّعْنَا بِأَسْمَاعِنَا وَأَبْصَارِنَا وَقُوَّاتِنَا مَا أَحْيَيْتَنَا. That, oh Allah, grant us the use of our eyes, our ears, and other faculties as long as you keep us alive. These are things that we take for granted. Earlier on, we were talking about that which we take for granted. The ability to see, the ability to hear, the ability to smell, the ability to taste, the ability to touch. Oh Allah, let us take maximum benefit. وَاجْعَلْهُ الْوَارِثَ مِنَّا. And make these our survivors. Meaning, let these things benefit us to the maximum. Then we continue with the dua. وَاجْعَلْ ثَأْرَنَا عَلَى مَنْ ظَلَمَنَا. That make our targets of revenge only those who oppress us. Let us not be people who go out willy-nilly wanting to avenge ourselves over petty things, over issues that really have no consequence. Then وَانْصُرْنَا عَلَى مَنْ عَادَانَا. Oh Allah, assist us when it comes to facing those who have become enemies to us. وَلَا تَجْعَلْ مُصِيبَتَنَا فِي دِينِنَا. That, oh Allah, let misfortune not hit our religion. If we are to be afflicted by misfortune, let it be misfortune in our worldly affairs, because that is not as important as our religious affairs. وَلَا تَجْعَلِ الدُّنْيَا أَكْبَرَ هَمِّنَا. Do not make this world our greatest concern. وَلَا مَبْلَغَ عِلْمِنَا. Nor the sum total of our knowledge. وَلَا تُسَلِّطُ عَلَيْنَا مَنْ لَا يَرْحَمُنَا. And do not impose on us such a person who shows no mercy to us. So we saying, oh Allah, let our greatest concern not be this world. Our greatest concern and focus should be the year after. Lord, let the sum total of our knowledge not be this world, because our focus is not this world. Yes, we must know about this world because we have to exist here. But our focus and our attention should be on the year after. And the final part of the supplication, that do not grant us such leaders who will oppress us and who will be harsh upon us and who will impose on us and have no mercy on us. So that's the dua narrated by the Sahabi Abdullah bin Umar radiallahu anhuma, and we discussed it last week. Now, this week, it's a much shorter dua, a much shorter supplication narrated by another Sahabi, and this time it's the father. Last week it was Abdullah bin Umar, Abdullah the son of Umar. This time it's Umar himself. Umar bin Khattab radiallahu an narrates the supplication, the dua, and it is recorded in Tirmidhi as well. Allahumma zidna wa la tanqusna wa akrimna wa la tuhinna wa a'tina wa la tahrimna wa athirna wa la tu'thir alayna wa ardina warda anna. Beautiful sounding words and even more beautiful in meaning. Literally it means, oh Allah, increase for us and do not restrict. Allahumma zidna wa la tanqusna. Oh Allah, increase for us and do not restrict. And the scholars have written that there's no specification here. We're not saying, oh Allah, increase for us in A or B or C and do not restrict us in X, Y, and Z. No, Allah, increase for us in everything that's good, in everything that's beneficial. And do not restrict us when it comes to everything that's good or everything that's beneficial. وَأَكْرِمْنَا وَلَا تُهِنَّا. Give us honor and do not humiliate us. Because honor and humiliation comes only from Allah. There's no king, there's no ruler, there's no supervisor, there's no invigilator, there's no evaluator, there's no one who can grant you honor, nor is there anyone who can disgrace you except Allah. وَتُعِزُّ مَن تَشَاءُ وَتُذِلُّ مَن تَشَاءُ. Allah is the one who grants honor to whomsoever He wills, and Allah is the one who disgraces whomsoever He wills. وَأَعْطِنَا وَلَا تَحْرِمْنَا. That, oh Allah, give us, do not deprive us. Here again, we are not specifying. We're just leaving it general. Oh Allah, whatever is good, whatever is pure, whatever is beneficial, whatever is constructive, grant us and do not deprive us. وَآثِرْنَا وَلَا تُؤْثِرَ عَلَيْنَا. Favor us and do not favor others over us. Meaning, oh Allah, favor us. In the end, we are in need of your favors. We cannot earn anything. We cannot achieve anything without you. And do not favor others over us in a way that will be harmful to us. Obviously, the system of this world is such everybody will not receive the same degree of bounty from Allah wa ta'ala. Otherwise, that whole system of interdependence will collapse. It is a requirement in terms of how this dunya is designed and how Allah has designed the system of this world, that we are interdependent. Some have more wealth, others have less. Some have more knowledge, others have less. Some have more expertise, others have less. Some have more experience, others have less. But when it comes to though others being granted favor upon us in a way that is harmful to us, that is what we are asking Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala to protect us against. وَأَرْضِنَا وَارْضَ عَنَّا, and make us be pleased with you and you be pleased with us. Make us be pleased with you. Let us be happy with whatever you give us. And let us happily comply with all of your instructions. And let us happily obey all of your prohibitions. And most importantly, O Allah, you make us from amongst those whom you are pleased with. Because when you are pleased with us, then there's nothing more we can desire, and there's nothing more that we can seek, and there's nothing more that we can try and achieve and we can try and obtain. So the dua for this week, Allahumma zidna wa la tankusna, wa akrimna wa la tuhinna, wa a'tina wa la tahrimna, wa athirna wa la tu'thir alayna, wa ardina warda anna. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen.
وأوشك اليأس أن يغشى أمانينا فبالجهاد بنى الإسلام قوته.
Welcome back. We now move on to our second feature, and this is where we discuss the ahadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Prophetic sayings, prophetic teachings, prophetic actions, all of which guide us, all of which instruct us, all of which are a source of light and a source of blessings for us. Just to recap on the two ahadith that we discussed in the last discussion. The one was narrated by our mother Aisha radiyallahu anha. She mentions, من تقم رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لنفسه في شيء قط إلا أن تنتهك حرمة الله فينتقم بها لله. This narration of Bukhari, Aisha radiyallahu anha mentions that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam never took revenge in his personal affairs. However, yes, when Allah's bindings were violated, he would punish for the sake of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. So what we learned from here was that if anybody harmed Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in his personal capacity, if anybody had violated his personal rights, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam would obviously always choose to forgive that person and to overlook the transgression of that person and not to take that person to task. But when it came to the laws of Allah, especially the penal code that Islam has in place, then those laws have to be implemented and those laws have to be upheld. Otherwise, there'll be chaos in society. For example, punishment for a thief. If the ruler continues to forgive the thief, then people will start stealing left, right, and center. People will start stealing without any fear of consequence. So there, in those matters, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala's rules and regulations and laws and penalties, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to uphold. But when it came to his personal matters, you can forgive that person, you don't lose anything, society is not going to lose anything. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would not take revenge. And I mentioned when we discussed this hadith that this is also a sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that in your personal matters, not to take revenge. Then the hadith that we discussed last week as well, with regards generosity, the narration of Imran bin Hussein radiyallahu an, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had said, "Man kana lahu ala rajulin haqqun, faman akharahu kana lahu bi kulli yawmin sadaqah." That if anyone has something due to him from another, he will be credited with reward of sadaqah for every day allowed to postpone payment. This narration is in the Musnad of Imam Ahmad rahimahullah. And I explained, it means that if you have somebody who owes you 100 rand and he was due to pay you after 30 days and the 30 days lapsed and you gave him 3 days grace, 3 days extra, then you get the reward of 100 rands of charity for each one of those 3 days. For each one of those 3 days, you get the reward of having given 100 rand in charity, even though you didn't give 100 rand in charity, but you granted that person 1 day's respite for that 100 rand that was owed to you. And this is not only an act of great kindness, but it's an act that secures you great reward. Because you're not spending in charity. Ultimately, that money will come back to you. You'll still get your 100 rands. But because you allowed that person to delay, therefore Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala will reward you with great reward. So those were the two ahadith that we discussed in our last discussion. Now the first hadith that I want to discuss for this week is a hadith narrated by the great Sahabi Abu Musa al-Ash'ari radiyallahu anhu. He mentions, "Inna min ijlalillah إكرام ذي الشيبة المسلم وحامل القرآن غير الغالي فيه والجافي عنه وإكرام ذي السلطان المقسط. This is a narration of Abu Dawud. He mentions that undoubtedly reverence to Allah includes, when you want to show reverence to Allah, then part of showing reverence to Allah would include the following. One, إكرام ذي الشيبة المسلم, honoring a grey-haired Muslim, honoring a person who is old and is a Muslim. One is you honor him because he has the kalima, la ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. Then you honor the person because he's an elderly person, he's grey-haired. But there's a third thing here. This person has grown old in Islam, and that's an honor in itself. So honoring a grey-haired Muslim, that's a way, that forms part of honoring and showing reverence to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. وَحَامِلِ الْقُرْآنِ غَيْرِ الْغَالِ فِيهِ وَالْجَافِ عَنْ. And also to show honor and reverence to a person who has memorized the Quran and he neither exceeds the proper bounds nor does he turn away from it. So he has memorized the Quran, but he respects the parameters that goes with memorizing the Quran. He does not commit excesses when reciting the Quran to try and captivate audiences, try and beef up his recitation and spice it up in a way that goes against the laws of tajweed just because people will like the tune. No, that kind of a person, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala frowns upon such activity. So the person who's deserving of honor is that Hafidh who upholds the parameters and who upholds the obligations of the Quran. And the third, which is mentioned in this hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, وَإِكْرَامَ دِي السُّلْطَانِ الْمُقْسِطِ, and honoring a just ruler. Honoring a just ruler. If a person is just and he's a ruler, it's a great accomplishment. It's very easy for you to get corrupted by power and by wealth and by control and by adulation. And the fact that a person, is elevated to the throne, is given the position of power and control and influence. He controls the purse strings, he controls appointments, he controls deployments, he controls hiring, he controls firing, he controls all of that, and yet he can maintain justice. It's a great accomplishment. That person is worthy of honor. So that was the hadith of Abu Dawud, narrated by Abu Musa Ash'ari radiyallahu anhu. Then there's the narration in Hakim. Abdullah bin Abbas radiyallahu anhuma narrates that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, Al-barakatu ma'a akabirikum, that blessings are with your elders. Blessings are with your elders. Meaning that your elders have lived longer than you. They have more experience, they have more wisdom. Perhaps you may have more knowledge. Perhaps you may be more intelligent. There's no doubt about that. Younger people can have more knowledge. Younger people can have more intelligence. But the elder people, they have done more good. And because they have done more good, they have obtained more virtue. And as a result, they have more blessings. So do not underestimate their value. And do not underestimate their worth. This is what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is teaching us here. Today, one of the greatest problems that we face in society is there's this tension between the younger and the older, between the youngsters and the oldsters. And somebody once gave a beautiful analogy. They said, for a cricket team to function, you cannot only have people who want to field in the slips, like the old ballets, just park there with your hands across your chest and you bend a little bit every time the bowler is ready to bowl. But at the same time, you can't only have the youngsters who are doing the boundary fielding, running around chasing the leather. You need both. You need those in the slips because they need to have a sharp eye. They don't run, they don't move an inch. But when that catch comes, it could be an important catch and they need to take it. On the other hand, when the ball is hit, then you need the person who has that exuberance and who has that speed of youth to be able to chase that boundary down, chase that ball down on the boundary and cut it off before it reaches the boundary, and to save that run and to ensure that the batsmen have to run for their runs and they don't just pelt it out towards the boundaries. So that's just, a sporting analogy. But the point here is that you need that balance, that wisdom of the seniors, the energy of the youngsters. Many times, elders tend to write off the youngsters. Don't give them time or the space to voice their opinion, to take some responsibility, to make mistakes and to learn from those mistakes. And they stifle youngsters. You know, they have this attitude, what you guys know. We've been through life. We've been through the mill. What do you know? And youngsters become then very disillusioned. They say, we only hear the same mantra all the time, the same talk, the same bayan. We went through life and we experienced this and you don't know and you won't know and you're still too young and when you're older you'll realize. And they get tired of those kind of slogans and they get tired of those kind of reprimands. On the other hand, you get youngsters who think, yeah, these old people, what they know, we know everything. We are the younger generation. We are the new generation. We know what the requirements are. We are the future of this company. We are the future of the organization. The success of any family or the success of any organization or the success of an ummah will lie in the youngsters and the elders finding that balance. Both finding the space to fulfill their own roles without trampling over each other and without tripping over each other. And here Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam is addressing youngsters and saying, Al-barakatu ma'a akabirikum. You may have the energy, you perhaps may even be a bit more intelligent, you may have all the new hotshot ideas, you may have all the willingness and the desire because now you're young and you're fresh. But remember, blessings still lie with your elders. Get the blessings of your elders. Get the supplication and the dua of your elders. They've been around far longer than you. They've been worshipping Allah far longer than you. They've been reading Quran far longer than you. Even the good work that you're involved in, they've been doing it far longer than you. They've laid the foundation for what you're doing. So don't deprive yourself or any of your initiatives of their blessings. This is a profound lesson for youngsters. That in whatever you do, whether it's a spouse that you want to choose, don't think that, hey, what do my parents know? You know, I know what kind of wife I need in today's time and age. They'll think of the kind of wife that may have been, good enough 20 years ago. What does my father know about the company? When he was running the company, it was a small 2x2 general dealer. I'm the one now who brought it up to standard, on par with modern times. Or what does this man know about the organization? He's just there now because he's one of the founding members. Remember, barakah lies with them. The blessings lies with them. And do not deprive yourself, nor your project, initiative, or institute or company from the blessings of the elders. May Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala grant us the understanding. Welcome back. We now move on to our tafsir segment. And tafsir means where we look at the commentary of verses of the Quran Kareem. And for a number of programs now, we have been discussing Ayatul Kursi, the greatest verse of the Quran Kareem. And last week we discussed the sentence where Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala mentions, يَعْلَمُ مَا بَيْنَ أَيْدِيهِمْ وَمَا خَلْفَهُمْ, that He knows what is before them and what is behind them. Allah knows what is before them and what is behind them. وَلَا يُحِيطُونَ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنْ عِلْمِهِ إِلَّا بِمَا شَاءَ, while they encompass naught of His knowledge except if He wills. And we explained last week that what this means is that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala knows whatever is before you and whatever is behind you, meaning whatever you did in the past and whatever you will do in the future. Whatever your conditions were in the past, whatever your conditions will be in the future. Whatever your needs were in the past, whatever your needs will be in the future. Whatever your difficulties were in the past, whatever your difficulties will be in the future. And the list goes on. Bottom line, Allah knows everything about past, present and future. Nothing is hidden from Allah. Allah's knowledge is absolute. Whereas our knowledge, وَلَا يُحِيطُونَ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنْ عِلْمِهِ إِلَّا بِمَا شَاءَ, while they encompass naught of His knowledge except if He wills. No one has any knowledge. It is what Allah has given us. And what Allah has given us is nothing in comparison to what Allah has. وَمَا أُوتِيتُم مِّنَ الْعِلْمِ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. Allah says you've been granted very little knowledge, man. A few specks. Like a few specks in front of the desert. That is what you have been granted. وَلَا يُحِيطُونَ بِهِ عِلْمًا. Your knowledge can never comprehend Allah. It can never encompass Allah. Allah is too great for that. Allah is beyond that. So no one has any knowledge. It's not something which is inherent. It's something which is bestowed. So Allah grants according to His desire and according to His grace to whomsoever He wants, how much He wants. And even that, it's not knowledge of the unseen which you are being given, because you are being told about it. So Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala is giving you the knowledge. So in reality, you didn't know it without any means of knowing it. That's really what it means to have knowledge of the unseen, which is something which is exclusive to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. Now today we move on to the next sentence, and this is where Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala says, talking about his throne. And the word kursi is used here, and this is where this verse is known as Ayatul Kursi, the verse of the kursi, the verse of the throne. وَسِعَ كُرْسِيُّهُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala says, His throne includes the heavens and the earth. His throne includes the heavens and the earth. Now, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala in this verse is telling us about the greatness, the vastness, and the magnitude of His throne. That it's bigger and greater, and it encompasses the heavens and the earth. Now, one thing we need to understand, that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala does not require the faculty of sitting or reclining, nor does Allah occupy a fixed space. No, Allah is beyond that. Allah is free from that. Because if Allah needs to sit, or He needs to recline, or He's restricted to a particular place, then that makes Allah similar to a human. And there has to be a difference between the creator and the creation. There cannot be similarities between the creator and the creation. So Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala is in no way similar to the creation. We cannot understand many of these things. Hence they are referred to as the mutashabihat. That what is the nature of this throne that Allah talks about? We mustn't start thinking of throne as we would imagine a throne of a king. Because that's an insult to Allah. Why is it that these things are so emphasized in the Sharia? Because that becomes an insult to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala when we say that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, the throne of Allah, we start to imagine it like a throne of a king, or like a throne that we would see in this world, because Allah is far greater than that. So the Quran says that Allah has a throne, so we believe in it. What is the nature of the throne and what are the details of the throne? That is where we say, look, we don't know, but the Quran mentions it, so then therefore we believe in it. Now there are two words that are used. One is arsh. In other verses of the Quran, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala uses the word arsh. And in this verse, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala uses the word kursi. And some translators have translated both as throne, the throne of Allah. And some have translated arsh as throne and kursi in the literal meaning, which is chair. Now what is the difference? That is what the commentators have explained. There is a narration of Abdullah bin Abbas radiallahu anhu where he says that if you take the 7 heavens and you spread them out, and then you take the 7 earths and you spread it out. Now when they combined, when they collected, obviously they occupy less space. But when they spread out, they occupy more space. So take the 7 heavens, spread it out. Take the 7 earths, spread it out. The throne of Allah is greater than the 7 heavens and the 7 earths spread out and all the space they occupy. And he gives a example. He says, the throne of Allah in relation to the 7 heavens and the 7 earth spread out is like a small ring that you throw in the vast desert. That ring is nothing in front of the vast desert. Similarly, the 7 heavens and the 7 earths spread out in terms of size and greatness is nothing in front of the throne of Allah. And Abdullah bin Abbas radiallahu anhuma is of the opinion that the arsh and kursi are 2 separate things. The arsh is the throne and the kursi is a chair. And he says the chair is greater than the 7 heavens and the earth. So much greater, like that ring in a desert. And the arsh compared to the kursi is so much greater, once again, like the ring in the desert. So, just to put it to you again, Abdullah bin Abbas radiallahu anhu is saying that the comparison between the kursi, the chair, and the 7 heavens and earth rolled out is like the comparison between a small ring which is lying in the middle of a vast desert. And the comparison between the kursi and the arsh, the throne of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, is like the comparison once again between that small ring lying in a vast desert. So he is of the opinion that the kursi and the arsh are 2 separate entities, 2 separate things. Some mufassirin are of the opinion that they are one and the same thing, that they are used as synonyms. Sometimes the word kursi is used and sometimes the word arsh is used. There are those who say that they are separate entities and they say the kursi is smaller and it is found upon the arsh. But whatever it is, as I explained earlier on, we must not start thinking of throne and chair like the throne and chair of a human. No, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala cannot be compared to humans. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. Allah is free of any similarities. Allah is free of any equivalence. Allah is free of this type of, comparisons. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala is beyond all of that. So we believe in the existence of the Arsh and the Kursi, and that it's far greater than the heavens and the earth. What the nature of it is, that is known only to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. وَسِعَ كُرْسِيُّهُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. That is the sentence of Ayatul Kursi that we discuss for this week.
أوشك اليأس أن يغشى أمانينا فبالجهاد بنى الإسلام قوته.
Welcome back. We now move on to our final segment for the program, and this is where we discuss our marital tip for the week. Now, in the last program, we spoke about space-time or me-time, and we said, imagine the scenario. Your husband comes to you and says, I want to go fishing this weekend. All my friends are going fishing. And you say, what? Didn't you promise me you're going to take me to my mother's house this weekend? Don't you know we need to go and buy some clothes for the children in the mall? And who's going to take me? And what's more important? What's more important? Me or fishing? Your children or fishing? And here the man starts to sulk and he starts to think, this woman, man, what a bore. What a nuisance in my life. What did I get myself involved in? On the other hand, you can tell him, you know what? I don't want you to go, but I can understand why you want to go. So I let you go, but know that I'm going to miss you. At least SMS me. At least let me know that you are okay. At least let me know that you are thinking of me. I can promise you, even if he had no intention of thinking about you, he would think about you. And he would SMS you and text you. And he would come back in a very good mood. He would leave in a good mood. He would come back in a good mood. And you have to also understand that they need their space. And men also need to understand that. So if she says, I want to go to my mother's house, and you think, hell, mother's house now this weekend, I must worry about where I'm going to get my food from. And I thought that, I'll have you had perhaps other plans or whatever the case may be. But you also be accommodating. Understand that sometimes that space, when you come back, then there's a bit more anxiousness to meet one another. So that's what we discussed last week. Now, this week, we said we're going to discuss a very interesting scenario, if you like, and a scenario that becomes a reality in many people's lives. Your husband works, and where he works, there are women. And as a result, they are not only going to be ugly women there, they are going to be beautiful women. They are not only going to be noble women there, they are going to be seductive women. Now, how do you react to this as the wife? Do you be the suspicious woman? As soon as he goes to the bathroom, you're browsing through his BBMs and WhatsApps and SMSs. As soon as he leaves the house, you're checking up on him. You're wanting to know where he is. If he's 15 minutes late, you phone the office. Oh, what time did he leave? They leave on time. Oh, why is he not taking my calls? Oh, he's in a meeting. With who is he in a meeting? And he gets frustrated. Not only does he get frustrated, he gets embarrassed. People start to realize that this man's wife is keeping tabs on him. This man's wife is like a tracker or a Netstar without the subscription. You don't have to pay. And here, she's like tracking his every move. And she's like a net just waiting to catch him and to snare him. No, that's not the right approach. But on the other hand, you can't be totally naive. You can't be blonde about it, as they would say. You can't wear blinkers and say, oh, my husband, he loves me so much. He's such a wonderful, Allah-fearing man. And then before you realize, your husband has been hooked with a massive hook by another woman. So not every woman out there is a seductress, nor is every woman out there a noble woman. That's the first balance you need to acquire. At the same time, you need to be smart in how you approach the situation. And, if you pester your husband, you're likely to drive him into somebody else's arms, even though that may not be justified. It's not a justified reaction from him due to your pestering. If you're all the time suspicious, there's going to be more tension in your marriage, and that's going to make the likelihood of him cheating increase. Rather, mark your territory, but in a smart way. If you are the one who sends a surprise gift for your husband, imagine there's a woman in the office, and she's got evil intentions. She's thinking, this man here, maybe, I can get my hooks into him. And here, what happens out of the blue, every now and again, massive bouquet of flowers delivered to the office for your husband from you, brings a big smile to his face, sends a message loud and clear that this man's wife, she's pretty interested in him. She's pretty focused on him. She's not going to let him go just like that. This is a woman with this is not a woman whose husband is neglected. That's the message that it's going to send. Secondly, sometimes you might see your husband is his eyes are starting to drift. Now you can tell him, hey, sis, what a big beard you have. And you're ogling at these women here and at the shopping mall. On the other hand, you can think, okay, it's wrong what he's doing, but let me also understand that he's in a particular environment. Look, I'm not justifying any wrong behavior. I'm giving advice which is realistic. And I've mentioned this in the past, and I don't want to sound like a broken record by every time having to clarify that in this particular few discussions, we are focusing on advice to women. There are times when we'll focus on advice to men. So let's not get very gender sensitive about these issues. Anyway, coming back to the point, now you see your husband ogling at another woman. You can get cross. You can throw a tantrum. You can clap him there somewhere in the middle of the shopping mall. What will you achieve? What will you achieve? You'll embarrass him. He'll hate you. He'll deny it. But then there's a more smart way to deal with it. And these things have been taught to us by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. At times a man may get attracted by another woman. At times a woman may get attracted by another man. But if you're going to go after every man that you are attracted by, and if you're going to go after every woman that you are attracted by, you'll never finish. You'll never have a relationship with anybody. Because there'll always be somebody who's a little prettier, who's a little bit taller, slightly better figure, slightly better voice, slightly better eyes, slightly better nose, slightly better toes, whatever the case may be. And you'll never be satisfied. But Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said, at times if you feel you're getting a bit attracted somewhere else, go and fulfill your desire with your wife. When that capacity now to be attracted is diminished, then automatically that possibility also diminishes and the door also closes to a large extent. So if you're seeing that your husband's eyes are wandering a little bit, or if you're seeing, hey, maybe my husband, I think, is getting a little too friendly with that secretary there at the office, when she phones that he talks in a very friendly tone, then the right thing to do is give your husband a few more surprises when he comes home. Make him realize how green the grass is on his side, that he doesn't need to focus on anyone else's, imaginary grass or anyone else's fake grass. No, these are the things where you deal with these very sensitive matters that could snowball, matters that could complicate your marriage. You deal with them smartly. And the reality is that in the space that he occupies, even if there isn't somebody in the office, it might be a rep, it might be somebody, right? Even the Maulana's wife, there are all these women who are coming to the Maulana's wife with their marital problems and this problem and that problem. It might be an appa in the madrasa. The Maulana's wife also needs to be alert. The Maulana's wife also needs to be wakker, as they say in the Afrikaans language. And the same would go for men. The same would go for men. But there are some things that are need a bit more emphasis when it comes to one gender in the marriage. And then we emphasize it a little bit more from that particular perspective. On other issues, the opposite gender might require a little bit more reminding, and we would emphasize it a little bit more from that perspective. Now, the whole point here, I think, is that you need to be sober, and you need to be mature, and you need to be smart, and you need to be intelligent in the way you approach these sensitive issues. In that way, you will overcome them, and rather than them affecting your marriage negatively, they will become boosters to your marriage. On the other hand, every small pebble, if you allow it into your shoe, then you're going to have feet that ache a hell of a lot. May Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala grant us the understanding. Well, that brings us to the end of another edition of the Sulaimaan Ravat Show. As I said in the beginning, I'll say it now, the pleasure is all mine. I hope you've enjoyed the program. I hope you've taken benefit. Make dua that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala grants me firstly the tawfiq of making amal. That's the ability to practice and to implement the little that I've said. Whatever your thoughts may be, you are free to interact with us via email, via the Twitter or Facebook platforms, or via any other platform that is possible and convenient to you. And until we meet again, inshallah, remember us in your du'as. Remember the ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in your du'as. في أمان الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
فالمسجد الأقصى ما زال يدعونا ندي على الفتية الأحرار في زمن أضحى به الحق بالخذلان.